Hi, everyone, and welcome to my talk at TEQnation 2021. My name is Michael, and I will be your host for the next half hour or so. Before we begin, I would like to thank the organization for hosting this event. There has been a minor inconvenience over the past year or so that seemed to cancel all the events. I'm not sure what happened there, but we're not here to talk about COVID. But I would like to thank the organization for setting up this virtual event. A lot of conferences have been canceled over the past year, and virtual events are a very nice and valuable way of providing an alternative to the canceled events. And I do hope that in the future, these digital participation events are able to augment the in-person events. So hopefully we'll see each other soon in real life, in person, on the next TEQnation. So thanks for setting that up. I know it's not an easy feat to do that, so thank you again. So first things second, possibly. My name is Michael Demey. I'm a Belgian, so for all the Dutchies out there, goedenavond. I am a research manager at IText Software. That means that I lead a small team of research engineers. We are tasked with stuff like innovation and standardization. That means that we look for new ways of improving existing products, and we try to prototype new products along the way. Trying out new technologies, looking at competitors, analyzing their products and projects, and looking at the market in general, playing around with new technology. It's all really exciting and cool. The second leg of my team, or at least the responsibilities of my team, has to deal with standardization. A little known fact about PDF, the company I work for, IText, is a PDF-centric company. So a little known fact about PDF is that it's an open standard. It is maintained and it is property of the ISO. A lot of people think it's owned and maintained by Adobe, but it hasn't been for well over a decade by now. For ISO work, we do have to work and collaborate in an international community. We work there for the Belgian flag, not for the IText flag. We have to collaborate to push forward the PDF specifications and to maintain them and to correct them where necessary. I haven't seen any Dutch people there, so if you're interested, to contact your national standards body. Aside from that, as you can see in that lovely picture over there, in my free time, I am a bass player. I would say I'm a gifted one, but I don't practice well enough to earn that title. I do love to play tango. I do love to play classical music. So if you're ever in Belgium and you feel like shaking your hips or moving your hand, at least in a rhythmic kind of way, do hit me up. At the bottom, that right there is my Twitter handle. I don't tweet often, but I do give you all permission to slide into my DMs and drop me a hi whenever you feel like talking. And then my other full-time job is being a dad of two awesome kids. They are a handful. As you can see in the picture, they are too cute for words. So that's me in a nutshell. If you want to talk more about me, feel free to grab me afterwards. So the story that I'm going to bring today is about how we at IText, how we maintain our software. There's a unique aspect to it that I haven't seen in a lot of companies when I talk to my friends or when I talk to college buddies. But before we dive into that, I do feel that I need to sketch what IText is and what it does. I promise it's not going to be a corporate pitch, so I'm going to just explain to you what IText means to me. IText is just two things to me. First of all, it's my employer, so they give me money so that I can be fed and that I can feed and clothe my own kids. So that's pretty awesome. So we in the company, we maintain a software product, and that product is also called IText. It is a PDF library, meaning that it is a jar file or a DLL that you can integrate into your own projects. That will allow you to easily create PDF files on the fly. So you would use our SDK, our API, to write code that would generate PDF files. Some of you probably have used that already, but there are multiple ways of creating PDF files using IText. It's not only creation, it's also manipulation and editing or analysis of PDF files like text extraction or OCR. If you have to process invoices, you might want to know You might be interested in the total line, the amount that you need to pay. IText will offer you some solutions to easily extract that from an invoice, for instance. So that's all to say, like, it all boils down to this fact that if you want to do something in PDF, IText will always have a way for you to do it. So so far the corporate lingo. Let's move on to the actual story. So IText, the company, has been around for about 10 to 11 years, like 2010, 29, late 29. And I joined the company 2011. When I joined, there was only 5 people of us. Me, an intern, a developer intern. There was the founder, Bruno, who was also a technical person. He wrote most of the IText code base. There was a sales guy and a marketing person. And IText, up until that point, had seen an organic growth. IText, the software product, basically is an open source software. It's been released 21 years ago. It says it right there on the screen, which seems like it has been ages, at least in the open source community. And like in the mid-2000s, it gained a lot of traction. It got really popular throughout its V2 iteration, where we added a lot of features that still exist today. Late 2000s, we changed the license model so that we can build a sustainable business model around it. So we moved to a more viral license, the AGPL, which, to boil it down to like just a soundbite. First of all, I'm not a lawyer. Don't take this as legal advice. And secondly, I'm really going to dumb it down. So don't follow my advice without reading the text. So the AGPL basically prescribes that you have to, if you want to make use of IText, you have to make your own source code open source as well with a compatible license or with a compliant license. In most use cases, that's going to be the same license, AGPL. But as you can imagine, most companies don't want to do that. Think about banks, think about governments, think about military departments. They don't want to open source their own source code just to be able to use a PDF library. That would be silly. So they have the option of buying a commercial license, and that's how we earn our money. I see it of a way as us also giving back to the open source community. And that has allowed us to revamp IText into IText 7 and then add a lot of features to it using some closed source plugins built on top of the open source model that we have. Initially, IText was released as a Java product. Bruno was a Java developer, so it only made sense that he would develop IText or at least a PDF library in that language. Throughout the lifespan of IText, a lot of people have contributed stuff to the open source community of IText. And I would say that the biggest contribution that we have seen from the open source community would have to be the arrival of the .NET port. As of today, and it has been like that for years, way before I joined IText about 10 years ago. IText is supported on 2 platforms, the Java platform, the JVM, as we all know and love or hate, depending on your stance towards it, and the .NET platform. Initially for .NET Framework 2. Something, don't quote me on it, but now we also support .NET Core, .NET Standard, whatever confusing name Microsoft gave to the .NET platform today. For all intents and purposes of this presentation, to the 2 versions of IText, IText for Java and IText for .NET, also known as IText Sharp, they are functionally the same. There are some differences. They're very minimal, but there are some differences. But that functionally they are the same, at least to me. This talk is gonna be more of a story about the technological evolution behind us supporting the interaction between these 2 code bases, because we did make the choice of not only providing the binaries for the .NET platform, but also making that open source. So we had to find a way, excuse me there. We had to find a way to also open source that source code while maintaining the equivalence in functionality. And that has been a very bumpy road, and there's a lot of blood, sweat, and tears that go into that story. Just to preempt a question that's going to happen at the end of the session, one of the differences between Java and .NET is, for instance, the crypto stuff. In Java, you have the JCA, which is, it stands for the Java Crypto API, I believe, which is an interface where you can hook up your own security providers. So that implementations only need to program against an API, and then you can use whatever security provider that you want to use under the hood. .NET doesn't have this, at least not at the time. I haven't kept up with the latest developments, if I have to be honest here. So that is a difference. And in practice, it doesn't really change a lot, because our Java build uses, in our testing suite, etc., mainly uses Bouncy Castle. Bouncy Castle is a very well-known open source security library, crypto library. And it's available on multiple platforms, Java, .NET, Python, even I think C. So if you ever need to do something with crypto, there's a big hint for you. But we don't ship Bouncy Castle. We have a dependency on it through our POM file, through our Maven configuration, but we don't have a hard dependency on it. We don't ship it. Whereas in .NET, we don't have that whole security provider thing available. We do ship at Bouncy Castle. So that's one of the main differences between the two. Just want to share that real quick, but in essence, functionally, they are the same. So let's treat them as the same for this presentation. So as mentioned, IText started off as a software and open source product. The very close, tight-knit group of people, contributors working together towards a common goal, providing a usable, user-friendly, and well-documented PDF library for Java and eventually .NET. And that saw some organic growth, as you can probably imagine. I'm not talking about functionality-wise. I'm talking about process-wise, like how do you test, how do you build, etc. And that's where this presentation is all. That's what this presentation is all about. We are going to talk about the things that that we've done, the things that we've done wrong, and the things that we're hopefully doing better right now. I do think we're doing better. And this is more of a experience story, not so much in a technical level. That talk might come on at a later stage. But I will share some technical details with you, but I can't promise you that I can go into too much of the details. So this is a story all about starting as an open source community, then going to a small startup with 5 people, 3 developers, 5 people at total, and then moving to a company that employs about 80 people, 70 to 80 people at the moment. It's hard to keep track of new hires when something like COVID is rampaging throughout the world. So yeah, growing pains is what this talk is all about. And the initial pain is real hard when you look at how the situation was when I arrived. So I was fresh out of school, fresh out of college. I had no real world working experience. I had done an internship, but they had left me to my own devices, which was great because I could do whatever I want as long as the task was finished. But it was also not great because I could have used some guidance. So upon arriving at IText, I found a situation that was not too dissimilar from it. As mentioned, very small company. And that shows in its build process. For instance, we didn't have a real build system. Anytime we had to build something, it was done on local machines. We didn't have a build server, or at least not well defined or well put up, well structured. So there was no real infrastructure for that in place. Next to that, one of the things I noticed was that there was no real test suite. You might remember from your college or university college days, testing is something that they talk about testing quite a lot in the university. That's not to say we didn't have tests. We did have some tests, but they were not enough at the time. And the tests that we did have were ran manually. Bruno, the founder, he wrote a few books on how to use IText. They're very, very well-written books, very good books, and they are still very usable to this day, if not only for the concepts of IText. And those books, they included a lot of code samples on how to use IText. It's a coding tutorial book, basically, so it needs code samples, obviously. So the test suite would exist out of those samples. You would run them and then we check the output manually. Did it change? Did it degrade or did it improve? If it degrades, then you need to make a bug fix, obviously. So, excuse me. So that was the current state of affairs concerning builds and tests. But what I noticed at the first release was that there was no structured translation between the two. So you had Java, we had a Java version, IText, and we had a .NET build, the IText Sharp build. And those two were handled quite separately, which in retrospect was a bit strange. Let me dive into how the development process worked initially. So again, a disclaimer, this is not to talk bad about the initial period. Do remember that this is all grown from organic growth. Things changed a lot during those times, and we had to make choices where to focus initially. So this is a story of progress. We have to start somewhere. So this was our process for the Java build. We would take a few weeks, months, depending on what we needed to do, and we would implement the features, bug fixes that we would push into the next release. Once that's done, we would test it completely. We would run the tests that we have, we would run the book samples that we had, etc., etc. If those ran successfully, then we would consider the build completed. Then we would actually build the Java code, meaning that we would start building the binaries that would go out to the customers, to the users, ready to be used. But also included are the Java docs, updated samples, etc. The documentation needs to be updated everywhere. So all that happens in that step. And then we are ready for release, meaning that we write a blog post, so we drum up some news, etc. That process in and out of itself, ignoring the first step, of course, ignoring that you have to write the code, that took about a week or two. Once we started to hire more people, we could delegate the testing and the building to multiple people, but it was still a cumbersome process. You don't need to have 3 people on call for a week to get a release out. And that's not how we would do things today. The big thing that's absent from this slide is the .NET build, because it was part of our release. It was part of the second part of the release. Once the Java part was out, or ready to be released, we would start converting every commit of the Java logs. So we would check the commit log of the Java repo, and then we would convert each and every one commit to a similar .NET commit, which is insane, right? And then we would test that code using .NET tests, because sometimes specific .NET issues might arise, and then we fix them, etc. And then you build that, and then you release that. So there's some upside to this. The upside is that you do a sort of delayed code review. You do a code review when you do the Java stuff, and then a month or 2 later, when you do the .NET stuff, you look at the code again, and you're like, what on earth is this? So you're reviewing code that you wrote like 2 months ago, which could be beneficial in some ways. The downsides to this is that your .NET build is so slow. It takes you about a month to get this out at worst. Another an effect that flows out of that is that because the release of, let's say, 555, IText 555 takes a month for the IText Sharp build, that means that you're treating IText Sharp as a second-class citizen. But one of the other downsides to this is that you might find some mistakes in your code, some logic mistakes. So you might have to update your Java build. You have to have a patch ready, which is added stress to the entire system. That being said, I sound very negative, but it doesn't have to be negative. That approach worked. I mean, we did it for longer than I remember, but it worked. But .NET felt like a second-class citizen. At that time, .NET wasn't that big in our user base. Right now, it's about 50-50 in favor of .NET, but we shouldn't treat that like a second-class citizen. So one of the first steps that we took was to move up the conversion process. So we write the Java code, we test it locally, and then we immediately write the .NET code. And then we test that immediately, and then we push that to the server. The added benefit here is you don't have to wait a month for your .NET release. You don't have to spend a week trying to read all your Java code and then convert that to .NET. You're in the mindset of fixing bug A in Java, so it's easy to fix it in .NET as well, usually in the same day, depending on the fix, of course. So your builds are closer to each other within the week, which is great. The downside is that the time for you to fix an actual issue basically, it doesn't double in time, it doubles in effort, in coding effort. But it is what it is. That effort was already there. So the next step that we took was a very logical one. It's one that we should have done from the start, and that is introducing a build server. Build server, Jenkins is the one that we use. And for those of you who don't know what that is, Jenkins is a tool that builds your code, basically. So you can have it triggered by a lot of things, but the trigger that we use is by every commit that has been pushed to the central repo. It builds that branch or that commit. So it builds the code, it tests it, and as of today, it does other things, but we're not going to run ahead of things. So we have tests now. We started writing tests a lot. We save time on building because we don't have to do it on our machines. We can do other stuff in the meantime. But we still lose time translating Java to C#. We still have to do that step manually. So you would push your Java code, translate your Java code to .NET, and then push your .NET code. And in the meantime, your Java and .NET code would have built. That would also lead to some inconsistencies and things being forgotten. It's not what you want, of course. That's where our colleagues in Belarus, so we work together with a company in Belarus, pretty awesome guys. They introduced to us Sharpen. And Sharpen is a tool, is a command line tool or a library that you can use for automating Java to C# code. So you would need to do some stuff in there. You would need to configure it. You would need to tell it how to handle certain stuff. It does take some configuration, some customization to it. And you would need to tell it to skip certain parts of the code because you would need to do those manually. Just think back to the crypto stuff that I talked about earlier. That is something that you would need to do manually. You would have to do your C# crypto stuff outside of Sharpen. So this is a process that we call autoport. I wasn't too involved in this step, so I can't share all the details with you, but it's basically a magic black box to me. You push your Java code, or you can even do it locally. You build that, and then you autoport Java, which runs the Sharpen tool. And then afterwards, that would build your .NET. So this screenshot here, it shows 5 steps. So you build Java, you test Java, then you autoport Java and to .NET, and then you build .NET and you run the test for .NET, all in one script. That is so convenient. That is something that we should have should have had ever since the inception of things like this. A few years ago, I think 2, maybe 3, a good friend of mine, well, he became a good friend of mine, a good colleague, now a friend, joined the company, Marco. He's the QA manager. He's my direct colleague, and he's working on a vision on a merge pipeline. A merge pipeline is basically what it says on the tin. It's a pipeline to merge code. Easy, right? So the merge pipeline deals with this. It revolves around a single principle. You don't want to allow direct changes to the develop branch. The develop branch is the branch that it's our working branch. It's the branch that will offspring into the release, basically. So you don't want to change anything on that branch, like directly. What would happen is you would create a feature branch in Java. You would make your changes, you would make your bug fixes, you would add your tests, and then you would push that to the central Git repo. If you want to merge your code into develop, getting it ready to make sure it's included in the release, you would tell Jenkins to run the merge pipeline. It does a few things. It adds some quality checks to it. We have SuraCube that runs some quality tests, and if you pass them, it moves on to the next stage. One of those tests, for instance, off the top of my head, would be to check if code has been documented well. If you changed code, if you added code, it needs to be documented to a certain degree. There needs to be Java docs. There needs to be some comment lines if necessary. The merge pipeline runs, first of all, it builds the Java build. Secondly, it runs the tests. Then it builds the autoport, because you might have changes in the autoport script, because we constantly update it. It's a source code. It's repo as well. It's a code base. So it builds that. It runs the autoport. Then it builds the .NET build, and then it runs the .NET tests. And after that, it also runs a whole slew of functional tests and integration tests and stuff like that. But there's a few things that need to happen before you can merge and develop. The quality gates need to be passed. The tests need to be green. Autoport needs to be successful as well. And the build has to be green. All this happens on Jenkins. All this is pure magic. It's a dream come true. 2011, Michael would have sure loved this. So this all runs on Jenkins, but you can also run it locally. The build scripts are all available locally as well. So before we dive into the questions, let's just recap real quick. It seems that we are at the end of the slides already. So we've put together a quick timeline of things. Let me just grab my pointer real quick. There we go. Before 2009, we had manual tests. We then moved to build systems. We used Maven. We also moved to Subversion in 2009. And as you can see, the release was manual, and the .NET build took us an extra month. Over the next few years, we added automated tests. We started using Microsoft Build as well, and we automated the release. Now, it took only 2 weeks now instead of a month or 2. Then we started formalizing release procedures. We started making scripts. We started making systems, and we started using Jenkins. In 2015, with the arrival of IText 7, we also have Autoport, which is a great thing, to be honest. When Marco joined us in 2018, we started with a merge pipeline. We added functional tests, and now we also have a test pipeline, which just runs the tests. It's not as interesting as the merge pipeline. And then Marco has a lot of things on his plate for the future as well. We already started using Cucumber, which is a descriptive, declarative language for tests, so that people who don't write code can write tests. PDF unit is a conception of my team, which it's a library to allow you to test PDF files more easily, etc., etc. So this is an ongoing story, and there's no end goal here. I mean, there's no finish line. There's a goal. We always want to improve. We always want to deliver more quality, but there's no immediate finish line. We can always improve, and so should you. So, oh, why is it not showing the next slide? Okay. Okay, so thank you for your attention. You have been great so far. I hope your questions are great as well. I would like to thank the TEQnation organization again for hosting this event and for having me. I do hope that your evenings will be nice, and I do hope to see you in person eventually. Thank you.
When creating PDFs, the first step is designing a template. Fortunately for developers, designers exist to handle that. But depending on the use case and how they design, a developer's life may become more difficult. Luckily, IText offers 4 ways to create PDFs, saving you time and stress. IText 7 Core provides high-level PDF creation APIs for ultimate flexibility and speed, or if you just need to replicate an image. Alternatively, designers may use a PDF editor to create templates using form fields, which developers can then fill and flatten. Fast and ideal for documents of a set length. If you have web designers, generating PDFs from HTML-based templates with PDF HTML is a great option. Finally, there's IText Ditto, an intuitive visual interface which anyone can master. And easily configure data binding, use conditional formatting and content, and more. And there you have it, 4 ways to save developers from having to design.